All right, everyone, I apologize for the less adequate lighting, but we're having warmer than normal weather yet again. It keeps happening over and over in waves. It goes down to about normal and then goes like 10, 15 degrees above normal. And there's flies buzzing around, and it's a shit show. I just got done talking to the red elephant, and there were flies buzzing around, literally like crawling on the webcam. So I'm trying my best here to deal with a shitty recording situation. It's time to talk about Right Wing Watch. Now, first, let me say I've actually been subscribed to Right Wing Watch for some time. I'm not sure whether they're aware of this, but I actually support their work. Like when they go after Pat Robertson and Glenn Beck and sort of the Evangelocon crowd, it's actually very useful to keep up to date on the crazy shit that they say. Unfortunately, they determined that I was a far-right extremist spreading hate via YouTube. And that somehow I was like on the extreme fringe of the right. So here's my video response to their own video where they have a little clip of me. Now, first, the clip that they use, I don't know if their fans will, even care about this, is misleading. In my video on affirmative action, what I am saying is that when you promote within a competitive environment, when you promote one person, even if you are not indirectly demoting the other person, it causes a situation where the other person is in a de facto sense demoted. Affirmative action indirectly demotes individuals who are Asian or white, and in some colleges, oddly enough, Jewish, within their entrance systems in the name of diversity. I'm not claiming any conspiracy beyond this. I'm simply saying that is what ends up physically happening. It is clear that that's what physically happens. If you have individuals who, their test scores would get them into the college, they got extracurriculars or whatever, but they are not given a position there because you've got a finite number of them to actually allot because you have allowed somebody in essentially because of affirmative action. What do you think is the result of that? It doesn't require any animus, and by the way, anyone who thinks that I have racial animus is totally wrong. Go back through my videos and you can see that for yourself. I am a libertarian. I'm considered a cuck, ultimately, by some people on the alt-right, and I've actually debated them on various topics. Spencer, he came out and was kind of dismissive of what I said on DACA. He's like, well, the DHS can build the wall right now and Trump can get everything, and I was pointing out no. Tara McCarthy, actually, I've debated with her on tokens. My willingness to talk to Red Ice, or to Richard Spencer, or Tara McCarthy, or any of these other people, does not denote that I agree with everything that they believe in. It denotes that I understand free speech and open discourse and the concept of being able to communicate with others. That's what it's about, so I don't know exactly what they're getting into there. I am not a far-right extremist. You can look through my videos, and why don't you find me some examples of me attempting to create or spread hate? I'll wait for 1,000 years because you won't find any, because I believe in freedom. I analyze what happens in the news. You'll notice, though, oddly enough, right-wing news not going after the legacy media, which does this all the time. Every time there's some event within the country, if there's some event involving a foreign theater, who calls for war first? The pundits start calling for war before the blood's even dry and before the politicians get a chance to weigh in on it. That's just the way that it's gone. I spent years ago, of course, when right-wing evangelocons were primarily the ones running our foreign policy into the ground because of Iraq. I spent years opposing them. All of a sudden, when Obama was president and the warmongering was coming from a bunch of neoliberals, people assumed that I was right-wing. They had called me a hippie before that. They thought I was a hippie. A beatnik. They thought I was called a commie on multiple occasions for opposing the Iraq War. Hillary Clinton and the neoliberals loved it. Bush and all the neoconservatives loved it. I stood against it. I stood against attacks on anti-war advocates, and they were attacked at the time, and everyone assumed I was far left, because that's the stereotypical partisan bullshit that goes on in this country. Now I'm apparently on the far right spreading hate because I stand against the abuse and excesses of groups like Antifa. Well, no, I don't claim that title. I simply support freedom. If you have a problem with that, well, that's your problem. If you support authoritarianism, I don't care whether you call yourself left or right. It's not going to make one damn bit of difference to me. But this is what happens. And the saddest part is you get a group like rightwingwatch.org, it's their website, that sometimes does great good because they're looking at some idiot like Pat Robertson ramble about, oh, gay people caused an earthquake. And you're like, well, yeah, I mean, he's fucking nuts. And then they actually try to character assassinate me, even though I've been a fan of some of their work. It's no different. I could have a sane conversation with people on the left, too. You could have invited me on to speak to political ideas. You could have had me aboard and said, well, what does Styx think about these 5 things? And you probably would have seen, hey, I'm not a far-right extremist, but it looks like somebody working there. I don't know whether this was the organization itself from a top-down level or whether it was some person just working with them. I guess had an axe to grind with me. Or maybe, can I make it a wild assumption here and exonerate you from any problems here? Let me make a wild assumption. Is it possible that this person just was not aware? Like, they looked up the fact that I had talked to people that do claim to be alt-right, and then they saw like 1 or 2 of my videos and extrapolated all my beliefs from them? Because if that's the case, I would like an apology. That would be quite nice because you're clearly wrong in your summation of what I'm about. If you look through my videos, you're not going to find like Evangelo-Con, diehard zealot Christianity, because I'm not Christian. You're not going to find any homophobia. I don't care what gay people do. I don't care what transgendered people do. I don't really care what anybody does as long as it doesn't directly affect me. See, therein lies the sticking point for me. And the reason why I say I'm anti-left. I'm not anti-left when the left is opposing war, because I oppose war too. I'm not anti-left when they're standing up for the rights of some marginalized group, but when they become the ones doing the abusing, after spending so long standing against abuse, how in the world am I supposed to stand with them? If that's what leftism is supposedly about, I can't stand with the left. That's neoliberalism. That's corporate bullshit. It's the same corporate bullshit that leads them to think MSNBC would never lie to me. Hell, I half expect them to start watching Fox News. Why not? They're a for-profit corporation too. What's the fucking difference? And my passive support of Trump on certain ideological issues does not equal some diehard love for his policies. I've called him out now, I think 6 or 7 times on different things, from CIA black sites to the strikes in Syria to the dicking around with the Cuba deal, which was one of the things I supported Obama on, quite happily, because it was time to end the embargo. If you think that that's the hallmark of a right-wing extremist, you have issues. You're a partisan, number one. We can tell that, an ideological or political partisan. Now, you've been fooled. You've been basically brainwashed. How is that any different from being like the most diehard Fox fan and whatever Bill O'Reilly says is automatically true? Right Wing Watch, I believe, is predominantly there to point out the dumb shit said by certain neocons, the warmongering faction of the GOP, more or less. So occasionally there's a Democrat that fits into that crowd more openly than others. As well as, the mega church pastors and some of these so-called activists, like a Glenn Beck type. Says, well, even Fox thought I was crazy. I had to start the blaze, and then I sunk that into the ground. Now I have to talk to Bill O'Reilly again. Woe is me. That, I assumed, was basically the point. The people you're talking about in this video are YouTubers, though. Now, some of those people, by your standards, yeah, they'd be far right, and they proudly consider themselves to be. I don't. And Sargon, he's a liberal. What? How the fuck is he far right? I'm not quite understanding it. Sargon is hardly far right. Some of the people on your list are certainly not ethno-nationalistic in any way, shape, or form. Sargon and myself would definitely be in that crowd. I'm not an ethno-nationalist and never have been. The only nationalistic leanings I ever professed were related to libertarianism because the founding goal, the cultural anthem of the nation itself, was liberty. The concept, yeah, you should be able to defend yourself and be free and do what you want. Why do you think I supported gay marriage even when it was unpopular to do that? I don't care what people do. So if that's far-right extremism, okay, whatever. I happen to disagree with you on that token. Was this like some Antifa member writing this article? Yeah, the article in the description along with their YouTube video, so you can go see it for yourself. Yeah, there are far-right extremists by your standards on that video. And they won't deny the fact that they're like extremist either. They'll say, well, you know, maybe kind of sort of, but yeah, I would consider myself to be far right. I don't. I'm not on the right. I'm not even a conservative. I'm not even a garden variety conservative. On some of these issues, I'm to the left of Bernie Sanders. What are you fucking talking about? I just don't understand it. The thing that gets me mad is really, why aren't you saving your fire for the media that has lied to you for 100 years? Like these corporate groups that are owned by, you know, half a dozen companies around the world and have no specific loyalty to anything but their own pockets. Why aren't you focusing on them? Now, they also destroyed, by the way, the Democratic Party's chances in the last election by shafting Bernie Sanders. Oh, but you'd rather ignore that. Don't talk about that one too much. You know, Hillary Clinton, who wanted to start a war with Iran, voted in favor and spoke in favor of the Iraq war. She's perfectly fine. We would never target her. Let's target instead this YouTuber who happens to have made a pertinent point about affirmative action. How, yeah, by the way, in a de facto sense, it's discriminatory. Let's cherry pick through his videos, find one instance we can kind of sort of relate to the far right, and ignore everything else. We'll ignore where he says he doesn't care about transgender troops. We'll ignore where he says he doesn't care if gays are married or do what they want to do. We'll ignore, you know, several dozen videos anti-war in nature, including under Trump himself, in opposition to his plans to strike some Syrian airbase. We're going to ignore that. We're going to ignore all the pro-liberty content. We're going to ignore basically everything he's doing and fixate on, you know, a 5-second video clip. Perfectly intellectually honest. No, I don't think it is. No, I think it's a problem. Then again, he also did the same thing to Sargon. I've spoken with Sargon. We're sitting there joking about the far right as much as we are the far left. What don't you understand about that? I stand against political and religious intolerance on all sides. The fact that I happen to stand against leftist abuse, it shouldn't bother you unless you're an abusive leftist. You're like a center-left individual. I don't have any fucking problem with you. If you're an Antifa member throwing piss bottles at the police, yeah, it's a little bit more of a problem. But some people won't get it. No, that's okay. My fans, though, know that I'm not an extremist. If you're on this channel, you obviously understand that fact. Yeah, apparently they don't. That's sad. It's like I'm familiar with Right-Wing Watch's content, and most of it I don't really have a problem with. Now they're going after a bunch of YouTubers. They're spreading hate. They're extremists. Okay, why don't you actually... See, here's the problem with labels and categories and definitions. In closing here, I'll say this. The problem is not that you would identify an actual problem that you perceive of and go after it. The problem is when you overstretch a definition to encompass people or things that are not actually legitimately part of that. If your beef is with right-wing extremism, people who have hate in their hearts, your problem ain't with me and it never will be. And it's certainly not going to be fucking a problem with Sargon either. If you think that he's filled with hate, I would submit that you have an issue to work on. Is not exactly Breitbart, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not exactly a Bill O'Reilly or a Glenn Beck. You know, if I was, then I'd be making a lot more money too. So just put that out there. That's about all. Peace out.